Behold, RPGs and Baby Makes 3.
RPGs and Baby Makes 3, Reimagined.
Episode 4 of the Reimagined variety. I put that in the last episode. I did add that in there a little bit in the last episode.
I don't re-listen to our stuff. You do, though. You walk around the house and listen to it.
Yeah, so we were, if you didn't listen to the last episode, we were talking about the possibility of doing a little sound every time that we said RPGs and Baby Makes 3 Reimagined. And then it would be like, do-do-do, from Wayne's World.
That dates us.
Yeah, it's a very day. I would like to watch those movies again, actually, now that I think about it.
Dreamweaver.
Oh, Tia Carrera. I saw her in something recently, like not in a movie, but I just saw like a news article or entertainment article about her or something. Anyway.
Something with words or visuals. Our words are visuals.
I'm Rob Hessler, and that's Gretchen Hilmers. We're the hosts of this S show.
Yeah, we've been sleeping slightly better, but I don't think that's going to make this any easier.
Yeah, old man Hessler got a CPAP machine.
No, Rob. It's a pap smear machine.
I got my pap smear machine. Let's roll for initiative. Well, we have done some gaming. We played some Starforge. We actually played some Ironsworn Starforge
yes,
together.
Yes, Rob. We actually played. It was not a session 0.
So, last episode, and even some of the previous episode, we were talking about what constitutes role-playing in a role-playing game. And we have a difference of opinion.
I'm right.
And I am really sad to say, and very, very disappointed in my longtime friend, Amanda Plagueman, for agreeing with you in the comments on our YouTube channel.
See? Thank you.
Which, by the way, you should like and subscribe.
Amanda. See?
Damn you, Amanda.
Amanda, next time I see you, I'm giving you a big high five. And then we can point at Rob and go, ha ha. Ha ha.
Her points and your points were valid, but I don't totally agree.
Oh, but we're married. Of course we can't agree on things.
This is something we've discussed before, though, is that I am naturally contrarian by nature. I literally, if I find something is working or I hear some people believe something, I just like automatically start wanting to do the very opposite of whatever that is.
I'm sure we've had some marriage counseling sessions about that, too.
Maybe.
Probably.
No, we haven't. No, but I mean, I think I look at that debate we were having on last episode, and I think of it like in terms of, I do think that I'm naturally inclined to say, I kind of agree with you, Gretchen, but how can I convince myself that the opposite is also true? Because it's funny, because we were just having a conversation about this, and this is going to relate to our topic here of the day, where we're going to talk sort of about inclusion and things like that. But where we operate in the gray, we're not very black and white on issues, and we're not extreme on issues. And so, like, I have just a general tendency also to almost like to just always kind of look at the other side of it. And I think that even goes to like philosophical things like what is role-playing. And I want to kind of stretch it out a little bit more into something else.
I stopped listeing to you because I'm right.
I know you did stop listening to me. I can just tell when you look at me that you're not listening to me. But it's funny because I'm reading this book, or I'm reading this book, but I have been reading this book for a while. I took a break from it, came back to it. It is Designers and Dragons, and it's 4 books, and it's the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. and I'm reading the 70s right now. And
Do you actually update your progress on books?
yeah,
Wow.
it's a game. It is. It's like a game. On Goodreads, we're talking about. On Goodreads, you can update the progress of your books.
I just put in the book when I'm done, basically.
I know, but whatever. I like to update it. It makes me feel good. So, I was reading it, and one of the things is, like, they're talking about in the 70s, and they were discussing one of the gaming companies, one of the early gaming companies that's, like, now defunct or whatever. I think it might have been... It was a fantasy game company. Anyway, point is that they said... They were, like, publishing a magazine, and they took player feedback for subscribers of this, like, early magazine that lasted, like, 10 issues. Because there were tons of magazines, like, role-playing magazines that came out back in that day. And they were taking polls from people to kind of rate the role-playing games that were coming out at the time. And there weren't, like, a ton, so, like, it could really be, like... all of the role-playing games were rated, you know, like whatever. And it was noted in this list that they kind of referred to in this particular part of the book, which had, you know, these role-playing games in order of the highest scoring to lowest scoring. And at the time, Dungeons & Dragons was the highest scoring of the role-playing games. It was the 1970s. Might have been even like... It might have been 1980, but it was like late 70s or like 1980 or 81. And a couple of the games on the list were not actually role-playing games. They were war games.
Dun, dun, dun.
Because at that time, they didn't even know what role-playing was yet, really. Like, they didn't really understand. And, like, role-playing was not anywhere near the dynamic thing that it is today. So, like, they would be, you know... just going, you know, the kind of that early story of Dungeons & Dragons started when, you know, Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson decided, like, well, what if we want to go under the table and go through a dungeon? Or play a single character on a war game board rather than, like, units and stuff. And that's kind of, those two things came together. And so a lot of those early games were, like, dungeon exploration. And it wasn't really, like, a ton of role-playing. It was a lot of tactics and stuff. And so, like, there was a bleed between role-playing games and war games that isn't as much these days.
I don't know, because I think whenever someone pulls out a map with squares on it, I think, oh my God, I'm in for it now. And it is very strategy based. So, you know, I think when it comes to dungeon crawls and stuff, I feel like you could say that it's kind of war gamey in a way.
I agree. You have to...
I don't know anything about Warhammer, though. That's kind of how that
No,
works.
Warhammer... Yeah, well, Warhammer was a tabletop, but there's also a tabletop war game, but there's also Warhammer fantasy... There's Warhammer role-playing games
Yeah, but
as well.
wasn't it originally like pieces you move on a map
Still
and
is.
stuff? And
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay, but it's like...
Not a map.
high
I mean,
fantasy.
yeah, even like you can build these terrains and stuff. Like
Yeah,
these awesome...
that's-
Some of those are so cool.
So I don't know. I think that kind of blends together quite a bit still.
Yeah, and I agree with that entirely because, I mean, you think about it like in a dungeon crawl, for
I'm
example...
so glad you don't do that.
Oh God, it's just way too
You've tried,
time-consuming,
and
and
it's
it doesn't hit my...
It
There's
doesn't tickle your fancy?
no, it doesn't get my juices flowing. That's an inside joke which you can learn more about if you listen to last episode. I do agree because I think that there's no inherent advantage or like necessary role play involved a lot of time in like a straight up dungeon crawl. Like, sure, maybe you like meet like some goblins and you have a standoff and you end up having a role play scene with them. Okay, you know, that kind of stuff. Sure, that can happen and there can be role playing in the dungeon. But also there is a lot of I creep up to the door, I check for traps, I listen at the door, you know, oh, I'm going to roll my skills, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff.
Which is hilarious, because I don't know, this just made me think about it, is whenever check for traps, you just have me roll randomly, and you don't tell me if I get it or not, and you always say, you don't notice any traps. that gets me so anxious that I'm talking about it right now.
It's funny because I'll do that with my because I play online a lot, and I'm running the Temple of Elemental Evil, and I'll do that to those guys too. I'll be like, and I'll just let them roll because it's just a pain. I want to take that off on my plate. I guess it would be more immersive if I rolled it myself and they didn't actually know if they succeeded or failed. But I will always answer with, "You didn't find the trap."
Yeah.
I love to do that, like just to mess with their minds. It's just a fun little thing. It was also interesting too, and I guess I kind of knew this, but it just was brought back to my attention. I was reading this, and we usually talk about books at the end, but I'm just talking about this now. Is early on those games really were antagonistic. The DM was trying to kill the players.
You're not paranoid. They're literally trying to kill
you. It was
your
a player versus DM scenario. Like, players would go into the dungeon, and the dungeon master was trying to kill them in the dungeon. And so it opened up beyond that, obviously, and fairly quickly it opened up beyond that. But it's just still, I think that that's interesting. It's an interesting little thing. Anyway, we're talking about being contrarian, and I think that's that like, I just think it's interesting that early on they didn't really even know how to define a role-playing game, and I think that there's a certain level of subtlety when you're talking about what is role-playing, especially now, because I feel like today role-playing is so storytelling. I mean, it has become so many of these games, especially like the indie games and stuff, are so storytelling based.
I mean, take Alice is Missing.
Right?
It's all storytelling.
Or even Starforge, which we were just playing, like there's no game master. We're telling a story together. Now, there are rules that act as guidelines, but we're telling a story. It's entirely a storytelling endeavor. And actually, I found it's interesting, I think, with like something like Starforge or Ironsworn, those games, you end up like having for me at least, it's harder to role play because I'm so into storytelling. So you notice that it was a little awkward, especially at first, when we would slip into character and have a conversation, because then we would have to move back to scene description or like, and you're like describing the scene and then taking on your character's role. It's almost a little bit harder because you're like, there's more storytelling and a little less role playing.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
And this might be a future show discussion. I really liked how, so AI art is really, it's so hot right
issue.
now.
Yeah.
So it's such a hot button issue. We were utilizing it a little bit to come up with certain things for the game to help visualize and create. And I don't know, it was kind of an interesting way to be able to kind of come up with something on the fly to help us further a scene or add some flavor.
Yeah, it got me interested in seeing. I actually did a little tiny bit of research since we did that on AI chatbots to see if we could utilize those to like run an RPG.
What?
Yeah, like could you use AI chatbots to run the game for you, and you act as players and you just enter in prompts based on what's happening in your game, and then they respond almost in the role of like a game master.
Well, what's funny is, talking about how originally the GM was trying to kill you. A lot of chatbots get real dark.
Well, they actually backed down the permissions on that one. I forget which of the chatbots had that really dark conversation with the reporter.
But that's not the first time I've heard about that. Like, things get dark. It's a statement about our society, but I feel like the AI chatbot would definitely try to kill you.
Interesting.
I think we're
the AI chatbot is Gary Gygax. So we played that, and we actually have Aberrant tomorrow, so that'll be cool. By the time you're listening to this, it'll probably have already streamed, because that's going to stream on the RPGs and Baby Makes 3 YouTube page.
Yeah. And speaking of AI art, I used AI to throw together what my character looked like. I used to use
Hero Forge.
Which is still fun.
Yeah.
But it was, I don't know, I thought it was kind of cool throwing together stuff through the AI.
Yeah, and look, we're kind of talking a little bit about AI, and
Next episode we'll dive into it. We'll talk about it more. I wrote a 2-part story for the newspaper. That's my day job. Before everyone else's article came out.
I know. I was like, the Washington Post article came out 3 weeks later. I was like, okay, I beat you to it, guys.
Savannah's ahead of the curve.
But I wrote this 2-part story for the Sunday paper here locally, and it was about AI and art, and so I know people probably have strong.
Someone else we've played with, which is Blakely.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah,
Blakely Scott, who is a role player, but she is a digital artist who has been utilizing AI.
I miss her. She's done.
I know her and her husband Anthony are great. But yeah, so I mean that's pretty much it in terms of the role playing that we've been doing, right? Anything else? No, that's it.
I mean, we've been role playing, being, I don't know, with our kid, kind of.
The storytelling and stuff like that.
Well, storytelling, but also, smiling through the pain.
Is that role playing?
I think that's role playing.
Maybe that should be the next debate.
Is acting and role playing?
Well, we're not. Oh God, I don't want to get into this again. Let's get into our main topic for today. So, I mentioned in the last segment that I am a newspaper writer for the Savannah Morning News, a freelance newspaper writer, and
I'm kind of a big deal.
I had the opportunity recently to cover a D&D event. There was Ghost Table Guild with Kat Valentine, who was actually on our podcast.
Yeah, talking about 5e.
Talking about 5th edition during our Edition Wars episode. Well, she runs this Ghost Table Guild, and they are a RPG, mostly D&D group, but RPG group that does charity stuff. So they do like streaming on Twitch and YouTube, and you can like pay little bits of money to make things happen in the game or whatever, and that part of those proceeds end up going to various charities, and it's all good stuff. And so they partnered with the local VFW, which is veterans of foreign wars, like these places in the U.S., that are for combat veterans.
I guess we have to specify that because we don't know that in other countries.
Yeah, and so they had this event there, and I somehow convinced my editor to let me not only cover it, but run it as a feature story in the paper. And so they sent me out, and the staff photographer, one of the staff photographers as well, to take pictures. And so, like, I'll kind of describe my experience. I've already submitted the article. It hasn't come out yet, but maybe by the time that this podcast drops, it will. And if so, I'll put a link to the article in the show notes so that we can get to it. But I drive up to the VFW, and this is like combat veterans VFW. Drive into the parking lot, dirt parking lot. The whole front of the thing is motorcycles. All right? And then milling about outside are some tough-looking men and women. All right? Wearing leather vests, covered in
and you roll up
all
in a
these
t-shirt
patches
with a D20 on it.
No,
right?
my t-shirt, I had a Minotaur on my
okay.
t-shirt. Okay. So I roll up in our, mini SUV. Okay. And I park, and so I'm like immediately intimidated. The place kind of has like a Roadhouse vibe in terms of like what the building looks like.
Okay.
It's got like a front porch deck, and it's painted red, and it's like, it's got like the beer signs in the windows and all that stuff.
Really?
It's this whole like Roadhouse vibe.
That's a little different from
right?
some of the other VFWs that I've seen.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, and it's like out in the middle of nowhere almost, basically, right off of this
Like Ogeechee
Road, which is outside of Savannah. It's like kind of out in the middle of it's the edge of
it's
Savannah.
on the edges.
It's on the edge of Savannah. And so like I get out of my car and I'm like, oh my, I'm feeling intimidated. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm like, what is this gonna be? And I go in, and first thing I see actually is the bar, which was an amazing looking bar because apparently they had filmed parts of the most recent Halloween movie there.
I want to see it.
And so they had redone the inside, and it's an incredible bar. You would never
really
expect
wanna
it. It's a
go
really
see
cool
it.
bar. And then to the left, after entering inside, there's like 3-4 steps down into this whole like hall area where there are all these tables, and that's where the D&D stuff is going to take place. But anyway, I have all this like feelings about like what this is going to be, like what kind of game is it going to be? A bunch of that guy. And I think all of you know what I mean when I say that guy, the gatekeeping, grognard, old school gamer who is very close-minded. I have this whole thing, I'm thinking that this is what's going to happen, okay? So that's what the vibe, I think this was going to be. And I go in there and go down to the gaming tables, and it is the most eclectic mix of people you can possibly imagine. There were some combat vets at the game, but also at my table was Howard Burry, the trans man that plays with us in Dragonlance and has played with us for a number of years.
It has been on the show before as Bianca.
One of the DMs is a black man running a sci-fi game. Kat is 100% Puerto Rican, half black, half white. There's these young men and women and non-gendered folks like playing, that are playing their first games ever. And then there are also these military guys. Like one of the guys at my table was wearing a Desert Storm vet, Iraq War vet hat. So this guy's playing at my table. And so is Howard. And so is this improv actor. And so is this lady, this teacher. And there's two things. I found, first off, is that being somebody who's like very socially liberal, very open, consider myself to be an LGBTQ plus ally, was going into this, and I saw these folks at the VFW outside.
Part of it kind of hurts hearing this though, because I find that people in the military are split very well, like very conservative or very liberal.
I agree.
And so I wonder because when I think military veteran now, like veteran, I think it's a huge gamut.
I agree.
No. But I will say, if you've ever been to, like, my experience in situations like this, I think the closest for me would be, like, what is it, like, the Lions Club or whatever, which one of my stepfathers went to, and that...
The Moose Lodge.
I don't even know the difference between them, but that was that kind of vibe.
Well, but I agree with you, what your statement is that it is varied, but when I drove up, and see all these motorcycles and all these like leather vest people, like God Bless America, the whole nine, in front of a roadhouse, essentially, I had a feeling in my head of what I was going to be walking into.
Right.
But when I walked down to the gaming area, it was a totally diverse crowd. And not only that, the diversity wasn't like, well, we're over here playing our game and you go over there and play your game. The liberals on this side and the conservatives on this side. It was mixed. It was mixed at each table.
Well, we've talked about this before.
And so, like, it got me questioning, like what kind of stereotypes am I bringing, A, and B, it got me, it was a really good reminder that most of the time we can all game together no matter what our viewpoints are, and it'll be fine. Like we could put aside that
unless you're
that guy.
Yeah.
Okay, we understand.
It is usually a guy.
It is usually a guy, but unless you're on you're in an extreme place, and I understand, and I'm not trying to diminish, I know people have experienced cruelty. I don't know how else to describe it. Cruelty by people who are not inclusive and all of that, and I'm really sorry that that's happened to those people. I mean, I empathize, sympathize with all of those people. But at the same time, the experience that I had in this gaming hall was one of openness, inclusion, and diversity. And I think, like, if you go on to gaming discussion groups and you go on this, there's this, like, almost this culture war that's happening, like, in gaming between old school gamers and new school gamers, and, like, there's, like, you're welcome at my table, all this and that, and there's all this, like, political division or whatever. But I kind of feel like at the table we're just all playing games. And one of the things that is cool about, and you and I were discussing this before the podcast, is, like, when you become friends with somebody, it's a lot easier to discuss your differences with each other in a way that is respectful and can actually bring about change and progress. Whereas if everybody's just shouting at each other on Twitter, then nobody's going to solve anything.
Speaking of chatbots, I mean, you're trying to get into a discussion. I don't know. I find it's from both sides too. It's annoying as crap.
Yeah. And I mean, I've gotten into some arguments with some pretty ultra-liberal people too, rigid thinking. I mean, I think is the enemy of progress, because we can't then... I just think we have so much more in common with each other than we don't. And I think that, like, sometimes what is happening online, especially, like, in gaming communities, isn't necessarily what happens in real life, where we can all get together and, like, we played this game, right? And the Desert Storm vet and the teacher, I believe they were a couple, but I don't know if they were married or whatever. And then I'm sitting next to Howard, and I mean, so we're, like, looking across the table at these folks, right? You would imagine there to be some pretty big ideological differences, but we're playing the game, and we're like, awesome! That was so, like cheering for each other, like, excited for each other, acting like good friends. Like, it was never an issue, And I was looking around, and we would take breaks. I'd go to the other tables and just talk to people because I was writing a story, right? So I was, like, going to talk to other people. It was the same at every table. Like, different people were getting together and putting aside those outside differences to enjoy each other's company together. And I think that that's, like, if we can do that in gaming, then we can talk in real life. Like, we can have conversations and overcome our differences, I think, and maybe find middle grounds that you'll never find in chat rooms or comment sections or Twitter or social media.
Well, I mean, something else that we learned that last week is our firefighter friend, that apparently the other firefighters at his station are really into D&D. And so I kind of wonder, does it really help with, building even stronger relationships? I don't know. Like, I'm fascinated. But I never would have thought, because the firehouse near us, like, every time they've come to our community meetings, they're very, New Yorker, tough as nails. I just don't see these folks sitting around a table doing D&D. So I have to wonder.
Well, and even our friend Justin, who's a really nice guy, he's like, I really want to get into it. And I'm like, he's fit, and all the women think he's attractive. And he's like this firefighter, like, and it's like he's got this, like, tall blonde wife, and, like, he doesn't fit the stereotype.
Do we fit the stereotype?
We kind of fit the stereotype. Not like...
Do I fit the stereotype? I do now. Do I? Yeah, probably.
I mean, I think that I think that the net is much bigger
Well, it's
than
become
it
so
was.
mainstream now.
Yeah, I mean, I think like,
Thanks to like Stranger Things.
I mean, it would be. I would argue. I mean, back in the day, there was so few women even playing. So like,
Yeah. Well, we've always been underestimated as being a part of things like gaming in particular.
mm-hmm.
Video games is really bad. Role-playing games. Creative fields.
But I feel like, but
Wait a
I mean,
second.
I can't. This is just one anecdote, so I don't know if this is what it is all the time. This was 20 people playing at 3 tables, at one VFW on one Sunday in Savannah. But Savannah's in the South. The VFW is that's a representative of combat veterans, and I mean, I saw with my own eyes. It makes me think that at very least, I can say with a certain level of confidence that we have made a lot of progress.
Yeah.
And I think that progress gets overshadowed by the noise, by people writing articles or getting on the news or whatever and just like shouting that this is how it is in gaming or whatever. And I don't know that that's true. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that like, I would like to think that I am more open-minded just from having had that experience.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Kat's a great game master.
Oh,
and
she's got some fire. I love her.
she was awesome, like,
I've
to
never
watch.
role-played with her, but, man, I see her online.
Oh, dude, I watched, like, I would go over there and just kind of, like, take a look, just trying to keep an eye on everything while things were going on, just for the story, and she's, like, waving arms around and doing all the voices and leaning in and and you could see all the players at the table because she ran the new players table, the newbies table.
Oh, she would be
people
good.
leaning in, and then she would like raise her voice at times, and the whole thing. It was like she was just doing an awesome job running that game. It's a passion for her, she's just so passionate about it. But
And also, same day was the little Starland Yard Ren Fair, which also had D&D running.
it did.
But I would assume people who are going to the Ren Fair are probably a lot more in line in some ways.
Yeah.
There were a lot of costumes. I think the best one that we saw was the Holy Grail, someone knocking together some coconuts behind King Eric. Was it King? I think it's King Eric.
Oh, it was. Was it not Arthur? Was it? Was it King Arthur?
Is it Arthur?
Yeah, it's Arthur.
Is it Arthur?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh no! Wait, is the actor Eric something?
Is it Eric Idle plays him?
Oh man, I don't know. My brain hurts.
I know. My brain is tired too. I gotta admit.
Yeah, but that was hilarious.
Yeah. It looked I mean, like it might as well just walked off the set. It was perfect.
It was really good.
Guy was wearing a burlap sack and everything. It was like the squire with the coconuts it was perfect.
It was pretty good. I don't know, but it was just kind of neat that on the same day, there's 2 different D&D things happening.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It was a drop-in thing. I will say though, it seems to me that at the Ren Fair one, they had games staggered all day long, and then when we were there was the one game going on. The people who were playing seemed to know each other.
Well, I saw a couple strangers walk up, but yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yeah, but at the VFW, what I noticed is that some of those folks knew each other. They definitely were like Ghost Table Guild members, but I was talking to some of the other folks, and they like didn't know each other. Like they didn't know, they just showed up because they saw the event and they wanted to try it out.
It is, yeah.
You know what I mean? And like,
That's neat.
yeah, like it was advertised at the VFW, or they saw it like on social media or something like that. But point being is, I just kind of wanted to bring that up because I'm gonna write this article, but I just thought it was powerful.
Yeah.
I thought it was really powerful to like have that. Anyway, tell us what your thoughts are. I mean, maybe you've had some experiences that either support my experience or perhaps go in contrast to that, because I know that I've also read a lot of I've read horror stories too, so I know that that's out there as well.
Really dark horror stories.
Yeah,
out there.
RPGs and Baby Makes 3, the number 3 at gmail.com, and we'd love to hear from you. Or you can also comment on the YouTube channel comment section. It's also great. I look at that as well. So, shall we move to the end of the show?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
This is the end.
Well, I already talked about one of the books I am reading, but I did actually finish another book. But what are you reading right now, Gretch?
Oh, what am I currently reading?
Are you still reading the Black Knife Chronicle? Black Knife?
No, I finished that. Since the last one, let's see, I read, I don't know, maybe last time we were talking, I was reading House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. And then I read the sequel to that, House of Sky and Breath. And then I also read A Court of Thorns and Roses. And, it's funny as I talk about how much I don't like high fantasy. Both of these were
I know,
high
I'm like,
fantasy.
those sound like high fantasy books.
Man, you got the first one that I mentioned. It's like angels and sprites and elves and werewolves, and there was a vampire mentioned at one point, and I mean, just what, and shifters of all kinds. Like there was even a swan person mentioned.
Shapeshifter.
I know, right? Shapeshifters are everywhere. And then the last one was humans, fae, and so I don't know, but maybe I should read. What's that arguing book? Nonviolent Communication.
The arguing book?
So that might be next on my list. Because I'm waiting for some things to come through now.
Yeah. So on the last episode, I talked about reading the Brandon Sanderson, the Stormlight Archive, the most recent book, the fourth one. And I read like 50, 60, 70 pages. And like they're just, he's doing their magic, and they're flying all over the place.
He's
and
an
all this stuff.
amazing writer.
And there's like Sprens, and it's all this stuff. And like, I am just not in that place right now. I am not interested in that level of magic and fantasy right now. And I just had to put it on the back burner and switch it up. So actually then it was like, well, I want to read some sci-fi. So I went back to the Expanse series, and I read book 3, Abaddon's Gate. And because we just finished the Expanse television show, watching the last episodes, and so I decided to read the third book because I'd read the first 2 before, and back then I kind of didn't like them. And I will say I was reading this book and I was like, this is really well written, but I wasn't really getting into it until like the last 4 days, and then I just like read 400 pages.
I know you told me I'm not really into this book, and then all of a sudden, you're
hundreds of pages. I was
literally
just like
consuming the
so
book.
into it, yeah. So that was I don't know. So that's kind of what I've been reading right now, and then I went back to that thing in the 70s, but the history of Designers and Dragons, the history of role playing.
Oh, it's still D&D.
Uh-huh.
It's still D&D.
But it's so funny because in that they're all talking about these games that in the 70s, like so many games try to do like the something and something. There are so many games that are like ripping off the D&D model of game naming.
When you were talking earlier and you were talking about the magazine.
Oh, you were listening.
Yeah, I was. But then it made me think about the, you remember they would publish magazines that were cheats for video games? Do you remember seeing any of those?
Well, are you talking about like strategy guides?
I mean, there were some magazines that were there, and then some strategy guides. It brought up a memory of me popping into a store to try to find a cheat for, I think it was Link. I think it was the Legend of Zelda.
That's your nemesis.
Oh, F that game.
Well, I guess I'm going to have to beep that one out.
Man, I'll never beat that game. Ever.
Gosh, I remember watching you get to the end of that again.
Finally, after finding the hidden village. What the heck, man? You just can't beat Ganon. I don't know. Whatever. Couldn't even do it with the Game Genie.
Well, you couldn't do it with a Game Genie?
Well, I don't know.
So, I don't know if you're out there, if you don't know what the Game Genie is. The Game Genie was an amazing piece of equipment that I don't even know how they could possibly get away with today. But basically, it was like a thing you plugged into your Nintendo and basically like broke it.
It cheated it.
It cheated it. Like it just
cheated.
would mess with all the coding and stuff.
Yeah,
and
you would have unlimited lives. You could get special equipment.
Yeah, it would like rewrite the games essentially.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. And
It still didn't make Willow a worthwhile game,
oh
though.
god, Willow. Horrible.
But the TV show was entertaining.
It was entertaining. It was good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the I don't know if they'll do more, but
Yeah,
watched the recent one. It was pretty good. But should we just get out of here? I mean, it's been a good episode.
Yeah, plus we have to go pick up our kid.
Oh, right. We have a kid. We do have a date night tonight, though, so that's great.
Ooh, we're gonna sit down and watch The Mandalorian.
Uh-huh. Pajamas.
Pajama time.
I'm gonna try to convince you to play some Starforged.
And you know it's kind of funny because other parents will roll up to pick up the kids from parents' night out in their pajamas.
Lots
too.
of people are either like really dressed up or they're in their pajamas.
Yeah.
It's like those are the two options because
No,
like
there's,
people
like,
drop their
nothing in
kids off.
between.
Yeah, they drop it off for parents' night out and then they just go home and put on pajamas and sit and watch TV at home. We did go on another date earlier this week to a nice fancy restaurant, the Gray in Savannah, so that was awesome.
Yeah,
So,
I loved it.
Gretch, it's great to do the podcast with you.
Yeah.
And if you listened this far, like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
We appreciate you listening, and we'll talk to you when we feel like doing another podcast again soon.
Well, with more sleep, maybe more podcasts.
Take care, y'all. You're supposed to say that. I stole it.
You did. You really confused me for a minute. I'm like,
You
wait
looked
a
at you didn't
second.
see Gretchen. I wish you could see Gretchen's face. She was like, wait, that's my line. Okay, you do it now.
No, it's too much pressure. Bye.